morning. How are y'all doing? Yeah. So, I'm going to talk about childhood. I want to start by saying that someone just pointed this out to me. This is a picture of a child not throwing a tantrum or freaking out or upset, but rocking out on an air guitar. It didn't even occur to me that he looked like he might be in pain, and somebody was like, why would you start with that? So he's very happy. Again, my name is Brent, work in design and music, and lately spend most of my time as a student at University of Texas doing a grad degree there. I want to open with this quote from George Bernard Shaw. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. So again, Ben asked me to come speak to y'all today at this great space on childhood because for about the last year or so, I've been organizing art, design, science, technology workshops for kids. And the goal of those workshops is really to sort of get the kids' hands dirty. They're all very hands-on. And to open up new areas for play, exploration, curiosity that they might not otherwise pursue or explore themselves. A typical event is sort of structured like this. So we have concurrent workshops all happening at the same time. Have any of you ever been to sort of like a maker fair, for example? So sort of like that, different workshops at different places at the same time. They are self-paced, and they are facilitated by mentor volunteers. So we typically have people come in with no technical expertise to come in, volunteer their time to work with the kids. We have about 5 kids to 1 mentor as the ratio. And then we really encourage the parents to stay and participate so that they can sort of bring the stuff that they do home with them and keep it rolling. So a few examples of workshops that we've done in the past. We did at Dallas Makerspace one focused entirely on music, so both high-tech and low-tech music. On the low-tech end, they built instruments like these are zithers out of cardboard boxes that they made. And on sort of the higher-tech end, they soldered together DIY contact mics from little piezo discs that are the things that make the terrible noise when your smoke detector goes off. You can actually, for about 50 cents, make a microphone. So they made those and hooked them up to drums and hooked them up to amplifiers and sort of experimented with making different types of soundscapes. We did one with Dell Children's Hospital right up the street with their Child Life program. And one of the things that we did is we taught the kids how to extract DNA from strawberries. When you extract the DNA and it sort of rises to the top, it comes out looking a lot like snot, which is awesome. We did one with Hackademia, which is sort of a global group that organizes workshops like this, at Alpha One Labs in Brooklyn and taught the kids about 3D printing. We had a group, so there's a biohacker space in Brooklyn called GenSpace, and we had some of the folks from GenSpace come out and they brought this game for the kids to play called Wet Pong. Wet Pong is a game in which in the gameplay you are actually playing live paramecia. So you turn the knob and they go like this, and you turn the knob and they move around. Your character that you're playing is a group of live paramecia. They're drawn to negative polarity on the screen. We can talk about it afterwards. It's weird and awesome and maybe ethically questionable. We did a project at TEDx Youth when a group of high school students sort of envisioned, designed, and built this room in which everything you can play, everything in the room is touchable and you can play it like a musical instrument. And it was opened up to the 1,000 some odd attendees at TEDx Youth last year. So these are a couple of the kids. That guy went absolutely nuts. Again, we did another one at Dell Children's Hospital with their Happy Healthy Living program, and it's focused on sort of raising awareness and educating around fighting childhood obesity. So one of the things that we learned about people in the program is that they really like video games. They like to play video games, so we decided to teach them how to design and build their own video games, but the sort of caveat or the twist was that the games had to involve physical activity, so running, jumping. So this is an example of one of the games. It was a racing game, and they actually had to sort of like a Dance Dance Revolution situation. They moved the cars by jumping around on the pads. This kid just turned every game into an excuse to breakdance, basically. And then finally at Travis Heights Elementary, just a couple of months ago, we had an event. We had about 200 parents and kids come through. And had several things going on. This is from the light writing photo booth that the guys from CreativeMornings, who I think are around here somewhere, brought and set up. Kids had the opportunity to learn about long shutter exposure photography and to create and sort of make really interesting pictures. We did biomimicry design, so they sat down and they studied wings and feathers, and then they designed and built their own wings and used them to push themselves across the room as a contest. We had also video game design here where they could sit down and design and create their own games and then play them on a big screen. And then we also taught them how to do street art and graffiti. We taught them wheat paste, which the parents may or may not love. But it is biodegradable, and they used wheat paste to create this big collage at the school. And then Katie, actually, from the Thinkery, came out and taught the kids about robotics using Legos. And then finally, the guys from Dove Academy came out and taught the kids about both old school and new school DJ technology. We'll just sit with this for a second. A little bit longer. Okay, that's enough. So I want to rewind. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories from those events, but I want to rewind first and be a little indulgent, talk about myself for a second. So I spent the holidays, this is the house I grew up in, doing some sort of spring or winter cleaning. My family likes to keep and hang on to things that are meaningful or things that like might one day be meaningful or like just things. Like we have a lot of things that we keep, and so we needed to sort of clean up and oust some of those things. And what that did is actually brought me face to face with a lot of artifacts of my childhood. So some of the things that I found were the first prize I ever won. My parents put me in a beauty pageant when I was a little baby, and I won Champion Chubby, which I'm very proud of. It's because I look like this, like my cheeks were trying to escape off of my face. I was jowly. Dino Riders, which is I don't know if these toys are still around or if any of you had them, but it's robots ridden by aliens with lasers strapped to their heads, which was awesome. Any of you have this book, Monster at the End of this book? Oh my gosh. So Grover the whole time is just begging you not to turn the page. There's a monster at the end of this book. He's freaking out. And then, spoiler, it's him the whole time. He's very embarrassed. And then I found some of my old drawings, early artwork, just really bad stuff, you know, old, early childhood drawings. I did find this piece of anti-drug propaganda. In which there's a guy who it says life in jail. He's wondering why nobody wants to be his friend anymore. There's a cop with like a saber and a nunchuck, and there's like a jet plane missile that's dive bombing this guy. Serious business. And then I found, this is another thing, this old candlestick. And I remembered that, so when I was a kid, Uncle Terry, who gave always the best Christmas presents. He was a scientist, he gave super cool stuff. One Christmas I got one of these. Did any of you have these plasma balls, right? And you touch them and then you sort of get the little zap on your finger and it's cool. But after you've done that a few times, like, what do we do now, right? So I sort of through a series of events discovered that if you took Nickelodeon GAC, which was another remnant of my childhood, and put it on top of the ball, and then through trial and error learned that you need to use gardening gloves for this, that you could hold the candlestick away from the Nickelodeon GAC, which is an amazing conductor, and it would shoot a bolt of electricity into the candlestick while you hold it, and then you could take, you know, little pieces of paper and push them in and set things on fire, and they would smoke. And then I did this one time with newsprint, and that was like the end of my playing with this in this way. Yeah. So, but the thing about that era, like when I think back about that period of my life, right, there was no such thing as, you know, as all of us drew and set things on fire and got our hands dirty and played, there was no such thing as a creative person, right? There's no such thing as an artistic person or as a technology person or as a scientific person or whatever person, right? You're just a person, right? And you're playing with stuff and you're making messes, you're just a person. So fast forward, I want to tell you a couple of stories from sort of things that I've learned from working with kids at our events, and then also a couple of stories from things that I've learned from working with grown-ups at our events. So the very first event that I ever did, sort of workshop like this, was in Berlin, and it was at this hackerspace called Beta House. And I don't know how many of you have been to Europe, but you go and sort of, if you try to speak the language poorly, they sort of are just like, they're there, little American. They speak English back to you, and almost everybody speaks English, right? And so I sort of assumed that that was going to be the case. The kids would come, they would speak English, it would be wonderful. We were going to do, one of the workshops that I did was on stop motion animation. So we had these different heads and Play-Doh that they could play with. But I was terrified because my background before doing this, I worked in finance, right? So I was used to like angry old people. Like that was my bailiwick. That's where I felt comfortable, right? And so these kids, I was like, oh God, what am I going to do? I sort of felt like the bottom left-hand corner of this picture, right? So I'm nervous. These kids are coming. As it turns out, none of them speak English, right? None of them. They all speak German. So I'm freaking out trying to figure out what to do. And all of a sudden, this kid, he's maybe 5 years old, just inserts himself in the conversation. He speaks English and starts translating for me back and forth. And so I say something. He repeats it to the kids, gives them the instruction. They do the thing. And then there was actually also another kid who had his little sister with him, and he would translate, I guess, into baby German to her. So it ended up being this, I don't know if you've seen this episode of I Love Lucy where she goes to jail in Paris, and she's like talking to Ricky in English, and he talks in Spanish to the drunk guy, and the drunk guy talks in Italian to that guy who talks in French to this guy. And it's this whole, it sort of went down like that, and we were able to make a bunch of really cool, sort of wacky little stop motion animations through this chain of command that was totally run by this little kid who stepped up. All of the notes. This is a story from Adrian, one of our mentors at our event at Travis Heights a couple of months ago in November. And so there's this kid, he's about 4 years old. And one of the things that we had set up, we used this thing called a Makey Makey, which is a very cool tool developed by some guys out of MIT that lets you actually connect sort of anything that's conductive to your computer and use it as an interface. So anything like a bucket of water, your grandma, bananas, whatever. And so this is an example. This is a banana piano, which a lot of people have used this to make. So we had it set up sort of like that. And he was playing with it, and he had a little whisk that he was using to play the notes, and there were fruits and vegetables all over the table, but he was sort of, limited, right? He's 4, and he's like, man, this isn't making a big enough sound. Like, you can tell he wants more out of it, and he's not loving, like, the melody. He's not getting a lot of melody out of it, this one at a time thing, and so he's playing with it, and then all of a sudden, you can sort of, like, see, like, the light bulb go off in his head. And I'll just read what Adrian said. He proceeded to connect all of the wires to a single fruit and started hitting that one wildly, the way that a kid would bang on the keys of a piano. And so through this messy piano playing, he basically discovered how the machine worked and remapped it to do exactly what he wanted it to do. So one other story from actually Mark Barnett, who is another person, is one of those people that everybody I feel like needs to meet. Mark runs the San Antonio Makerspace and also runs the Geek Bus, which is sort of a bus that brings workshops like these to schools all over the Austin and San Antonio area. And Mark sent me this story. I'll just read it to you. He said that there was an 8-year-old boy who was at one of my summer camps at the San Antonio Makerspace. I found him staring at the 3D printer while I was printing. He was there for several minutes, not even blinking, just watching as the printer laid down plastic, one layer at a time. He looked up at me and said, "It's like an imagination factory," referring to the 3D printer, and went on to say that whatever I can think of, I can design it, and I can print it out, and I can hold it in my hand, which I thought was pretty amazing. One more story that actually was sort of sent to me after I'd sent Ben my slides, so I don't have slides for it, but I wanted to tell you, was from Bethany Corey, who I don't know if she's here, but she works here at the Thinkery with young kids, little kids. And she said, "I'm constantly amazed at how our youngest visitors take an activity I designed and turn it into something else, like the 8-month-old who lost his mind spinning a hard hat around on the ground, unaware that it's supposed to go on somebody's head. Or the 2-year-old who climbs inside the bucket of dirt. Or the 3-year-old who pulls apart the popsicle sticks glued into a triangle to make an A and an M because those are her initials." Kids play, and there's no need to see things as they're intended. Young children live in a world of unlimited possibility by imagining and exploring. So talk a little bit now about grown-ups. How many of you were at Thinkery 21 a couple of weeks ago? I heard it was awesome. One thing that was funny, though, that Katie shared with me is that during this event, during our first adult event, we got a lot of "what am I supposed to do here" questions from the adults. which took all of us off guard because kids never ask that, right? They just go. The adults are like, please point me in a direction, help me know what not to do. But the kids just go. And something that we've learned about working with our mentors, who are all amazing. Many people, or there are several people here today that have worked with us and mentored at past events. And we do things that, on first pass, when you hear about it, it might sound like it's sort of an intimidating thing. Like we did a paper circuitry workshop where the kids were able to use conductive tape, conductive glue, and paper to make things sort of like high-tech origami. So when you folded it, lights would light up and that sort of thing. Or video game design, or the strawberry DNA stuff. And one thing that we've learned, or the mentors sort of come to us and say when we introduce them to, would you like to do this workshop, is, well, I'm not so much a creative person, so you might want to put me over here, or I'm not an artistic person, so I don't know if that's the right thing for me, or I'm not a technology person, so I might not be able to handle this, or I'm not a scientific person, or I'm not a whatever person, right? And one of the things that we've learned is to train the mentors, we really do the same thing that we do to train the kids, which is just sit down and play, right? Sit down and play with it for a little while, and then see what happens. And it works. It tends to work, right? But something that is interesting is even with that, it still tends to take the mentors about twice as long, if not a little bit longer, to learn how to do things for any given workshop than it does the kids, who just sit down and start playing. And so I want to actually end on a story. I was driving with a friend, and I asked her sort of about her own childhood. And what she said, actually, I thought was quite beautiful, so I wanted to share it with you. As a baby, stitched together in the womb, I was developing my 5 senses, or 21, depending on who you ask. And once you're out, you fully sense all those things. We develop physical senses, and we also develop emotional senses. And the two are inextricably linked. We come into the world, and everything is everything. And we feel so much. Lights are brighter, sounds roar, fingers tingle as they explore around the room. When I was a girl, I'd cry, and it would knock me over. I'd laugh and practically choke myself. But as we grow, we learn to filter. And we filter the overwhelming sensory input. We filter because we have to. We filter to survive. And we learn to winnow down from that grand kaleidoscope down to things that are necessary, things that are functional, and things that help us to survive. And no one ever tells us to stop filtering. So we keep layering more and more on top of ourselves until we're in a box of personality that we believe ourselves to be locked in. We're a whatever, fill in the blank, person. But right now, I want to get back to that place, to what I had before I became an individual, when I was creating with total abandon, and when I looked deeply and allowed myself to see and to feel all of the things. When I look back on these early drawings of mine, they are a total mess, absolutely. But they're totally free, right? There's a total freedom in the creativity that comes out of kids. There's a freedom to connect without the fear of being embarrassed. There's a freedom to improvise without worrying about getting it wrong. There's a freedom to imagine without constraints. And there's a freedom to dive in and love the uncertainty of all of this. And I actually think that we, in this room, as people who work in creative jobs, right, might even have a harder, more difficult, sort of more intentional road ahead of us when it comes to breaking down some of these barriers, right? Because every day we tend to spend time doing creative acts around a specific purpose with a specific end. And bringing ourselves back to that sort of freedom, I think, might even require more intentionality on our part. But I urge you to do that. And we're actually in the perfect place for that. For the rest of the time that we're here now, you can stand up, you can play with all of this amazing wonder that the Thinkery has done an incredible job of bottling up. But something also to remember is that what the Thinkery has done here, sort of, they've created a snapshot of things that are available and exist and alive out in the real world as well. So let's play, let's follow freedom, let's look deeply and create freely. Thank you.